Yes. Good evening and welcome to the June 10th, 2014 meeting of Phoenixville Borough Council. I'd like to start with a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Crack, roll call.
Mr. Bowers.
Present.
Mr. Dalton.
Present.
Ms. Dugan.
Here.
Mr. Richter.
Present.
Mr. Kuznar.
Present.
Ms. Mayo.
Here.
Mr. Perednik.
Here.
Mr. Kowaleski.
Present.
Mr. Mayor.
Semper Fidelis.
Manager, Solicitor in Chief here. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Moving on to item 3 of the agenda, consider approval of May 13, 2014 minutes. What is council's pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Mr. Bowers. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Item 4, presentations. I'd like to invite Mr. Dilworth and Mr. Makita, I guess, to come up on behalf of the JCs, or Mr. Dilworth.
They really help us out with taking care of the trash and just making sure that everything stays in working order. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to thank Police Chief Mossman and his squad. Without their presence during the week of the festival, as well as their help during the parade, this event really could not happen. With that being said, as a token of our appreciation, I'd like to present a check for $3,000 to the department for the purchase of some new equipment. And we will also be donating $2,000 for the 4th of July fireworks. We look forward to finding other ways to help to give back to the community, and we're already looking forward to next year. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dolan, on your comment, we do, I would like to acknowledge that we do have the checks, the real checks, which I'm going to give to Steve to cash. Thank you again to the JCs. It was a wonderful event. I was down there almost every day for it, and it's a great thing for the community, that's for sure. Thank you again.
Thank you.
With that, I'll open up the first round of public participation and call any interested individuals to come up and speak. Please sign in, acknowledge whether or not you're a borough resident or not, and please keep comments to 5 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Thomas Sakel. I'm from the 200 block of Morgan Street. Excuse me. Back in January, the residents of Walnut and Morgan were issued notices that they were going to be including in with the parking permit. I guess it's parking A, section A or section 1. As of this date, nothing's being done. As far as patrolling, checking on cars that don't have permits, cars that are sitting there for days, weeks. Just wanted to know what was going on. I understand that they were trying to amend some other streets. We're into June. The years will be over in 6 months. We've all paid and wondered, are we going to be reimbursed or are our fees going to be waived for the following year? Thank you. I spoke with Michael Kuzner about this, so he had told me to come down to voice my opinion.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay? Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A borough resident, David Sanick. What I'm speaking tonight is concerning, and this is somewhat in the future, but I don't think it's that far in the future. My comments concern an old issue around town known as the Chester-Montgomery County Connector, also known as the Phoenixville Spur, which ran from the intersection of 23 and 724 out to 29 and Black Rock Road in its original proposal. I understand there's discussions underway in which certain developers are asking to have that spur right away given up to part of their project in exchange for some things they will do to build a shopping center. I don't have all the pieces, so I'm telling you some of this is what I'm hearing. And I think it would behoove Borough Council to find out, because it is basically in East Pikeland's bailiwick right now where it is, but the spur right-of-way is, I believe, Commonwealth property, which means we have an interest in it as well, because it was originally laid out there in an attempt to get a transportation link, a major transportation link into Phoenixville, which, if you've ever been stuck on 23 for 45 minutes, you might understand why some people might have thought about that. But I would ask the Borough Council members to, apprise themselves of this and formulate what your opinion would be, and as it might benefit the borough to go along with what some of the plans are, or parts of it. But I think you have to. I think this needs to be preserved for future use, that it's not altered in a way that it can't be used for, say, 20, 30 years down the road, some type of transportation link. I understand what's being proposed. It'll never be a roadway ever, whether, and who knows what might be available, 20, 30 years out. There might be something that really works well for all parties in a way that it's a much better thing. So, but if you give that up, then you're kind of landlocked, and there you are. So I would ask Borough Council, and I know your advisors, the solicitor and the manager, are probably well informed on it, and to look into that, and to be apprised of it, and make sure that we're not losing more than what we're gaining. So that's my comment for tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Sanick.
All right, have a good night.
Good evening. My name is Tish Jones, and I am a resident here in Phoenixville. My interest is a stoplight or some stop signs over there on Route 23 where the Episcopal House for people coming in and out of that street. It's very, very hard to get out of there. It takes a long time for, if you want to go out, to either go left onto 23 or to go right onto 23. And I understand that there has been some information about some lights that's supposed to be going there, and there's supposed to be money that is available for that. So I'm not sure what the plan is going to be, and I was just concerned about it because I'm in and out of that area a lot, and I have to wait a long time to get in and out of those streets right there where the Episcopal House is. So, and also there's another housing right behind the Episcopal House. When people want to get out of there, it takes them a very, very long time to get out and also to get in. So I'd like to know if there's going to be any plan to evaluate and look for the money that is supposed to be available to be putting a stoplight there to get in and out of that complex. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Seeing no other public participation, we'll close the first round of public participation. Moving on to item 6, call for residents interested in being appointed to various boards and commissions. Just for borough's edification and for those at home, we've had a resignation that I think is going to be coming up later on the agenda from the Planning Commission, one from the Tree Advisory Commission, as well as it looks like we have some openings later this year on the Beautification Advisory Commission, and we have two alternates vacant for the Civil Service Commission. So those are the open positions right now. If there's anybody, any residents that are interested specifically in those, they can contact Borough Hall and go through the process of submitting their application and going through that process. Seeing nothing else, we'll move on. Communication and council participation. Mr. Prednick?
I'd just like to read a quick email I received from Dale Yeager and his school, Kuntau. Last year, the Borough Council of Phoenixville passed a resolution designating July 27th as Filipino-American Cultural Day. The Pennsylvania House and Senate, Senator Andy Dinniman and State Representative Warren Camp also congratulated Phoenixville and Kuntau Club for his designation. This year, we will be celebrating this important event on July 24th at 7 to 8 p.m. at the Kuntau Club in the Franklin Commons. As you know, Chester County and Phoenixville have one of the largest and most active Filipino-American populations in all of Pennsylvania. We want to honor them. So I just wanted to share that with fellow council and the public. I'll be attending the event.
Thank you. Any other? Mr. Kuznar?
Hi. As a few of you just heard from a resident on Morgan Street, so apparently some residents on the 200 and 300 blocks of Walnut and Morgan, Quick between Hall and Morgan, and Jackson between Church and Walnut, and Lincoln between Hall and Morgan have all purchased parking permits. But as many of you know from the Parking and Steering Committee, it was decided that the permits weren't going to be enforced for another couple of months. So at the request of Tom, who just spoke, and on behalf of all the residents that had purchased parking permits, I would like for them to be credited next year when they go to get permits, to renew their permits.
Mr. Kuznar, what I would suggest is that you make a motion to that effect in new business.
In new business.
In new business, the next section. This is council participation.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you. Do you have anything further?
No.
Okay. Ms. Mayo?
Thank you. I also did, Mike forwarded me the letter about the parking, and I actually wanted to schedule another parking steering committee so we could sit down and talk about how to deal with that issue, because it is something that I thought of too, because I also spent the $50 for the guest pass and then the $15 times 2 for, our permits at home as well. So you know, maybe in July, we can sit down and talk about that through parking steering. I don't know what the resolution for that is right now, but that's probably something that we can work out through parking steering. So I was going to say that anyway during council participation, but Mike just kind of got to it first, so. We'll be working to schedule a meeting in July.
Thank you. Mr. Richter?
Hopefully I'm not stealing any of Mr. Mayor's thunder, but the email that Chief Mossman sent out today about the accreditation status of the police force, I'd just like to again say how proud I am of our force, of Bill's leadership, and all of the guys down there that did their part in making that accreditation happen and continue to happen.
Mr. Prednick?
I just have one last item. Just wanted to remind the public that all the council committee meetings are open to the public. There is a public participation at every committee meeting. So,
Thank you. I have two things for council participation. I received a invitation from the County of Chester, Chester County Agricultural Land Preservation Board, notifying us that they are accepting farmland preservation applications. I'm not sure we qualify, but I'm going to give this to the manager to look into. And just to echo Mr. Richter's comments, congratulations on the accreditation. I'm glad it went so well, and kudos to you and your department, Chief. Any other council participation? Seeing none, move on to new business. Mr. Kuznar?
So I'm sure you all just heard what I just said. I would like to make a motion to credit residents of the streets that I had named, and I can give them to Mr. Crack if that's needed, to be accredited for permits that they had purchased for this year. Since the permit parking isn't being enforced, be credited when next year.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Kuznar, second by Mr. Dalton. On the motion, any discussion? Mr. Crack?
If this motion passes, would there still be, there would be no need to be a parking steering committee meeting?
There wouldn't be a need for it, but I think there really is a need for it, because I don't think that we should be necessarily, I mean, once we get the ordinance and everything together for the new streets, we will be enforcing it, so they will be needed for at least part of the year. So I don't know that crediting for the whole year is fair. And I think that that's something that could be, I think that people should be credited, because I'm also one of them, but I don't think that, you know, just crediting for the whole year just because they didn't use it for 3 or 4 months is fair. So I think that that could be taken up in parking steering committee.
Mr. Prednick?
hey, Mr. Crack, would there be a way of doing a partial refund for only the months that it's not enforced, so that if it does turn out to be enforced mid-year, then you can start only reimburse them for that portion?
Well, we can, obviously, we have a list of people that applied. It's relatively easy to prorate if that's where we'd go in quarterly increments. To that end, whatever council decides, we'll follow that process.
So based on the motion that's in front of us, is it that the case, that it's going to be prorated?
Well, let's use this as an example. If they paid in January, you have on your agenda tonight an ordinance to schedule and advertise for July 8th. That ordinance is the one that would put the other remaining streets into effect. So basically, potentially 6 months at the high end would be prorated for next year.
Any other discussion? And I guess for clarity's sake, the current motion is for 1 whole year. So if I'm understanding it correctly, and that's why I'm trying to make sure that everyone knows what's going on, because I don't. So if you bought a pass this year, whether you bought it yesterday or you bought it July or January 1, crediting all of 2015 based upon a purchase this year of that pass. Is that accurate, Mr. Kuznar?
Yes, that's accurate. If, I mean, do we want to open up, I mean, I hate to ask this, but I mean, like, how are people voting, or what way are people leaning on this? Because I'm okay with just crediting for the full year, to me. But if that's, I mean, if it's not going to pass too, I guess we'll have to do it partially.
Well, that's what the discussion's for, to see what council is feeling right now. Mr. Perednik?
I would suggest to Mr. Kuznar, if we can amend the motion so that my opinion is that they should be credited only for the portion that's non-enforceable.
We can,
So Mr. Kuznar amends his motion and second, and you, the second, adopt that amendment, then we can just proceed.
I'll adopt that amendment.
all right. Ms. Mayo?
Does the credit also apply to the guest pass? I mean, so at most it would be $25 for the guest pass if we're saying 6 months, and then, I mean,
Oh, I think the motion on the floor is not for any money transaction, but rather to provide additional months, so that if you had a guest pass and 2 parking passes, and let's say it was 6 months, you bought it 6 months and there was a 6-month time frame when we were not enforcing that pass would be extended for an additional 6 months to cover the portion. All 3 passes would be extended 6 months to cover the portion of the time for which we weren't enforcing
but
the parking regulations.
if, this is a question for Jean, I mean, don't we get new stickers in the new year that are different colors?
Yes, we do.
So,
We would, the easiest way to handle this, I believe, and I'll defer to Mr. Neese on this, but those that, we would have the list as of right now, what you're doing today. We would have a list of who paid, and in January of next year or December of the end of this year, whatever is appropriate, when they come in, we'll prorate that new permit and temporaries for 6 months. So if it's $25 for the year for the temporary, then it will be $12.50 for 2015.
okay.
Mr. Richter?
Mr. President, I'm just wondering if we know what put us in this predicament, why we were charging for permits without the street being signed? Just for my edification,
Council passed it, and then there was the recommendation after discussion at, I forget which month's meeting it was, to forego implementation. So there was a time between it being passed. We usually, I think staff usually gives 30 or 60 days where they do warnings to individuals before tickets are actually given. So during that time frame, that's when we had a lot of public participation, and council decided to forego basically ticketing until we made a final decision, which I think we will be in July. Mr. Neese, do you have comments?
Just need clarification. I understand what you're saying. I guess the question I have is, if somebody buys a pass in July because they've waited, are they also getting the 6-month proration?
No, what I said is, as of this meeting, if it's bought and you're in the system, you're in the system. Anything from today forward is not.
Okay, so just
Because
so
we
that I
shouldn't-
understand what...
We shouldn't be issuing permits until we resolve the ordinance.
Okay, just want to, well, because some people have been using the permit to park on the other streets that we are enforcing it on. That's why I'm asking. So I just want to make sure I'm clear on what's happening.
Okay.
That's why I suggested that we take it to Parking Steering, because there's so many wheels in motion, there's so many different things that we should really have a chance to work out, but.
Any other discussion on the motion? This is the prorate for next year's based upon purchase prior to this meeting of parking passes. So that is the motion that I believe everyone will be voting on here in a couple seconds, unless there's any further comment. No, seeing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Thank you, Mr. Kuznar. Any other new business? Seeing none, moving on to item 9, resolutions. What is council's pleasure?
Make a motion to advance a resolution for the submission of a DVRPC grant application to review and update the subdivision and land development ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Bowers, second by Mr. Dalton. Comment on the motion? Seeing none. Mr. Prednick?
I just have a question for Mr. Crack. Was it named something different than DVRBC?
I'm sorry?
Was it named something else in our packet besides DVRPC?
It's,
Okay.
right, TCDI, which is Transportation Community Development Initiative, which is a subset program of Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comment? Mr. Bowers?
We'll just add that this is a necessary complement to our new zoning ordinance, so it is certainly a prudent next step that we need to take.
Thank you. Any other comment? Mr. Crack?
I just always want to make sure that council understands that we are required to provide the match, with 20% match, which is $9,700. That is not in the 2014 budget. We will present that information to, when you approve this, it means we'll be taking it out of, we'll be doing a budget amendment for $9,700. Now, we will also be going to submit to the county under their Vision Partnerships program. That's an eligible match, so we're going to ask for the $9,700 through there. But worst case scenario, this would be a budget increase sometime later in the year if we didn't get the match.
Thank you, Mr. Crack. Any other comment? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-1 with Ms. Dugan being the no. What is council's pleasure with items B and C?
I'd like to make a motion to consider a resolution for the submission of the CDBG grant application for abatement and/or demolition of certain structures in the borough.
Motion by Mr. Prednick, second by Mr. Bowers. Comment on the motion. Mr. Bowers.
Again, this is a long overdue action that we need to take. As we drive through the borough, we know there are numerous properties which are dilapidated, unsafe, which right now we just don't have the seed money to begin the process to take some of those properties down. So this is a needed first step.
I agree. This is, I think, our second or third time trying to get this grant. Second time, Mr. Crack. So hopefully the county agrees with us this time. Any other comment on the motion? Mr. Crack.
Just to be sure, this does not require a match. So it is $250,000 without a match.
Without a match. Thank you for that clarification. Any other comment? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. What is, Mr. Prednick?
I'd like to make a motion to consider a resolution of, make a motion to consider a resolution for the submission of a Commonwealth Finance Authority grant application for the borough wayfinding project.
Motion by Mr. Prednick, second by Mr. Richter on the motion. Do you want to lead with whether or not there's a match?
There is a match. This one, it's a 30% match, meaning for a $200,000 program, $60,000 to the borough, $140,000 in the form of the grant itself. Some of you may recall that we had previously submitted 2 other applications and have $29,000 of that $60,000 from the Schuylkill River Heritage funds and the Schuylkill River Trails program. So council at this juncture is shy about 31,000. So that would be, today, that would be the match. Of course, we will continue to pursue other matches for that as well, but at the end of the day, there could be a budget increase of 31,000. How much? 31,000.
Mr. Richter.
Mr. Crack, just refresh my memory about the total for the wayfinding project.
It's 200,000.
Okay.
That's the estimate that we have as of today.
On the motion, any further discussion? I think this is a well worthwhile project that is needed in the borough as we continue to be, as we continue to expand and have more and more people coming into the borough. That's for sure, certain. Any other comments? Mr. Bowers.
Council President, I do agree. It is a needed project. I still have reservations of, just that that the borough ought to solely, should be one of the primary funding sources for this. This benefit, there's a greater good to this throughout the business community. I know we've had some generous donation. We've had a generous donation, but I think we can't do this alone entirely. It would appeal to the business community of this borough to consider some further donations to help us through this wayfinding project.
I was remiss, you reminded me, Mr. Bowers, thank you, that in the conditions of use for the approval of Madison at French Creek, there was a component of that requires a contribution to wayfinding. So that will generate the opportunity to go to the other developers as sort of a Me Too request. So we will be doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Crack. Any other comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-1 with Ms. Dugan. The no. Moving on to item 10, public hearings.
Did you want to make a motion to open a public hearing, Mr. President?
I'll entertain a motion to open up a public hearing. Thank you. Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Mr. Dalton to open the public hearing on the motion. Seeing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0 to open up the public hearing. I'll turn it over to Mr. Kilkenny.
Thank you, President Kovaleski. What's before council tonight is contemplation by the public of a resolution. This resolution is provided for under the Borough Code, which authorizes a borough to exchange real estate. The long and short of it is this would be an exchange of the old Borough Hall site located on Church Street for 501 Franklin Avenue, aka Friendship Village, and that site. As part of the process, we were required to go ahead and get appraisals, and those, the Borough Code contemplates that in these swaps, that the borough has to be treated at least equally as the land being swapped for. When we got those appraisals, we found out actually the borough was getting significantly more per the appraisals in this transaction. So as is required by the Borough Code, this has been advertised, and that'll be marked as B1, Borough 1, a copy of the advertisement in our newspaper of general circulation, the Pottstown Mercury. And I believe that gave an explanation as to what we're contemplating this evening. If you wanted to open up to council comment and public comment, and if then council wanted, they can either close the public hearing, continue the public hearing, and then perhaps take action on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Kilkenny. We'll open up public participation on this issue. I ask that if you choose to come up during this portion, that you speak only on this issue at this time. Dr. Sanik, same rules, please sign in and keep your comments.
Sign in
to 5
again?
minutes. Yes, please.
Okay. I just wondered, what were the appraisals, if that's part of public record?
The appraisal of 501 Franklin was $1,900,000. The appraisal at 140 Church Street for the land value was $525,000.
Thank you.
Seeing no further public participation, we'll close public participation. I'll open up council participation. Mr. Richter?
I'd absolutely like to commend staff and the solicitor for making this happen. I know they were venturing down some unknown roads at times, but putting this together as swiftly as possible and giving us this kind of resolution to put in front of our residents, I think was a win-win for everybody.
Any other council comment? Mr. Bowers?
Thank you, Council President. I think this was certainly an issue that all of us on council recognized we had to act on. It's just a hair under 3 acres, but I think we recognize that losing that 3 acres potentially would impact future events that this borough wants to hold, the fireworks, the Firebird, any number of events that lie in the future. We were becoming very limited as to where we can hold those types of events. And council recognized that we needed to move quickly, and it was done. It's a win-win for all in the borough.
Thank you. Mr. Brednick?
Couldn't say it better. I just want to echo John and Chris's statements. Both will side, and again, my thanks to the borough and staff for doing theirs, and the solicitor for doing their part to make this happen quickly. I agree, same thing. It's a win-win for everybody on the north side as well, and the whole borough.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll close council participation. And what is council's pleasure with regard to the public hearing? I think we need a motion to close the public hearing if that is council's. Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Mr. Prednick to close the public hearing. Any comment on the motion? Seeing none, all of those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The public hearing is now closed. What is council's pleasure with regard to the issue at hand?
I'd like to make a motion to consider the resolution for the land swap of the real estate.
Thank you, Mr. Prednick. Second by Mr. Dalton. Any further comment on the motion? I think other than we had a slightly revised motion that, or resolution that Mr. Crack provided to us, hard copy, which is the subject of the motion. Any other comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And one abstention. Myself. Moving on to item 11, reports of committees, boards, and commissions. With regard to the Planning Commission, I believe, Mr. Crack, that is a moot point because they have not submitted their zoning application.
That is correct. In the Planning Commission recommended in their action memo that council not oppose HTC builders when they make their application to the zoning hearing board for a variance. As of today's meeting, unfortunately, HTC builders has not submitted an application for the zoning hearing board, and my advice to council would be that they table this because the earliest that HTC could get before the zoning hearing board would be the third Wednesday in July. Your next meeting would be July the 8th, so you still have time to provide that same recommendation from the Planning Commission without interrupting the process with HTC builders. Until such time as they get an application in, though, it should remain open.
Thank you, Mr. Crack. Mr. Prednick?
So, Mr. Craig, can you just clarify again that if we don't take any action today and they submit an application next week, it will then go before council next month, but at least then we'll be voting on an application, and then they still have time to go to zoning hearing and planning?
They would not need to go back to planning. They merely are submitting not merely, but they are submitting a zoning hearing board application because they need a variance based on zoning at the time. The application process to give the zoning hearing board enough time, they meet next week. There would be no time for them to have reviewed an application between now and then. So the zoning hearing board would get that in their third Wednesday in July. You meet the second Tuesday of July, so there's no impact on the applicant at this point in time, assuming they put their application in to meet the zoning hearing board deadline for July.
Mr. Richter?
Mr. President, while I respect what Mr. Crack's saying, we get our council packets the Friday before a Tuesday meeting, so why is it not enough time for the zoning hearing board to get something tonight or tomorrow for a meeting next Thursday, I think is their meeting, correct?
As with the planning commission and zoning hearing board, they have the consultants that have to review. So the consultant, all of the information you're getting is reviewing for making a decision. The consultants to the zoning hearing board or the planning commission, being the planner, the engineers, or the lawyers, have to have time to review what they're asking for, go back through, and in this case, go back through the old ordinance because it was prior to the one that you passed in December. I can't speak for Mr. Greenwood's time as to how much time he needs. So we typically require applications in 3 weeks in advance of those meetings.
Mr. Bowers?
Just clarify some gray space to me here. I want to be sure we're handle this correct. Do we need a motion to table, or could a no action be interpreted differently by the applicant?
I'll pass that to the solicitor.
Good point, Mr. Bowers. It's essentially one and the same, because on most applications, council stays neutral. So if you stay neutral, yeah, and if something came up, if there was a drastic change in the plans, Mr. Crack could always contact Mr. Kovaleski, and he could send us in an emergency to deal with that. But there's no need to necessarily to table it. If you don't take any action, we wouldn't go and oppose. So.
Mr. Dahl?
My only question is are we impeding the builder any more than he's already been impeded by tabling?
No, because there's no application in. So there's nothing to act on.
And on that point, we're being asked to not oppose the application, and we don't even know what we're not opposing because we haven't seen the application. It could end up, and I don't know HTC builders, but maybe they're going to put an electronic sign on that application. It would be ridiculous, but the point being is we don't know what we'd be saying we oppose or we don't oppose until we actually see the application. Ms. Mayo?
Can somebody just help me understand why this is on the agenda in the first place?
Mr. Crack?
As happens, I put the agenda together on a daily basis. Things are coming at me. When I received the Planning Commission's action memo, I immediately put it onto council's packet. It wasn't until I asked the question earlier, between last Friday and today, where's their application? I'd like to just take a look at it, and there was no application. So this will be, unless you advise differently, this will be on the July agenda again.
Seeing nothing further, moving on, Regional Planning Commission?
Nothing.
Okay. Historical Architectural Review Board?
There was no meeting this month.
Thank you. Council, moving on to item 12, council action referred from committee, Police and Personnel Committee?
Yes, first I would like to make a motion authorizing staff to do the necessary paperwork to accept the vehicle donated by the district attorney's office to be added to the department's fleet.
Thank you, Mr. Kuznar.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Kuznar, second by Mr. Perednik. Discussion on that motion. Mr. Richter?
I would just like to ask Mr. Neese how we would be impacted by this addition of a vehicle.
The additional cost to the borough, which is what I'm assuming you're asking about, will probably be somewhere between $1,000 and $1,200 for the insurance. Typically, a vehicle, depending on the year of the vehicle and the amount of usage in a year, I would guess another couple $1,000s between gas and repairs. But I would say it's probably going to be minimal because it's not going to have the same kind of usage that necessarily all of our other police vehicles have.
Thank you.
Mr. Bowers.
I guess I would just ask or request that this vehicle not be added to the vehicle purchase plan as a long-term capital transfer.
Good point, Mr. Bowers. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
Consider recommending the reappointment of Randy Moran to the Tree Advisory Commission to a new 5-year term to expire June 30th, 2019.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Kuznar, second by Mr. Perednik. On that motion, seeing no comment, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. I'd like to thank Mr. Moran for his continued service, another 5 years on the Tree Advisory Commission.
Consider accepting the resignation of Carol Stinson from the Planning Commission.
Second.
I'll give that to Ms. Mayo. Motion by Mr. Kuznar, second by Ms. Mayo. On the motion, seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. I'd just like to thank Ms. Stinson for her service.
Consider approval of the Civil Service Commission recommended changes to their rules and regulations.
Motion by Mr. Kuznar, second by Ms. Mayo. On the question. Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mr. President, I believe I read in the one document from the solicitor or whatever on the civil service that fire department would be included in the borough code on this in the civil service if they had more than 3 members. It was in a 1 or 2 page document.
In the review document.
And as in the past, my understanding is civil service only covered our police department.
I'm not sure if that is required by borough code or if that is something else.
I don't think
I believe, Mr. Mayor, that what they're doing is they're referencing the paragraphs directly from Borough Code, but I don't believe any of the changes that are in the document itself.
Well, a quick question, Mr. Mayor, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I apologize for my ignorance. Do we have paid fire here?
We have 2 paid drivers.
So the way I read this, then the paid people would have to follow.
But the issue with the paid or...
Apparently, Mr. Neese has some comment.
They are paid out of the fire department. They're not employees of the borough.
Okay.
Correct.
So then that would not apply. Does this, the way this reads, is it reads that fire, if you have paid fire, then it would apply. But you don't. So you don't have to worry about it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Anything further?
Yeah, I'd like to defer to Shai for this next.
Mr. Prednick?
So we received, Mr. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we received a letter of resignation from Tom Costello. I don't have a letter right in front of me, but I know that there was a resignation there for him resigning from the Tree Advisory Commission. So I'd like to make a motion to accept the resignation of Tom Costello from the Tree Advisory Commission.
Thank you. Motion by Mr. Prednick, second by Ms. Mayo on the question. Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Thank you. Anything further, Mr. Kuzma? Moving on to Parks and Recreation Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to bundle 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7 for approval.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Mr. Prednick. So we are bundling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7.
Correct.
What is council's comments from council on that? I had noticed, Ms. Mayo?
Correct. From 10:30 to...
Sorry, I didn't have my mic on. We have one that was changed from, the first one, that was changed from 5:30 PM to 10 PM, rather than 10:30 PM. So if you would kindly add that into your motion.
I will amend that motion for the approval of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, and ask that item 1 be changed from 5:30 PM to 10 PM.
And I'll accept the amendment.
Thank you. Any other discussion? I had a couple comments. With regard to the Club A annual picnic request, their insurance certificates seem to be inadequate. I don't know if that was addressed in Parks and Recs. The insurance certificate does not provide the required amount of insurance as set forth in the form. It's a $2 million aggregate, where this was only a $1 million aggregate.
Mr. President, we will, before we issue, assuming you approve these tonight, we then issue the actual permit itself. We won't issue the permit until we get a revised insurance document.
Okay. And then, I don't know if it came up, I couldn't be at the Parks and Recs committee today. I was watching my daughter play t-ball. She got a hit. With regard to the Taylor Morgan Hamilton Foundation Walk, they're using the Schuylkill River Trail, but I noticed that there was tents to be set up. I didn't know if they're starting, it seemed like they were starting from the Borough building, so were they intending to use some of the parking spots?
They'll likely do that, yes.
Okay.
And these are the 10 by 10 little pop-up.
Okay. That's a Saturday morning, so I don't think that should be an issue unless there's a big rush at the farmer's market. I'll gratefully deny, or excuse myself from that one. That was my only comments. Mr. Prednick.
Just one quick one. On number 4, I'm just concerned that if the people, runners, spill over onto the streets, there's a potential safety issue. I know we talked in Parks and Rec. I just want to reiterate if there's a way we can ask them to have enough marshals out there to ensure that everybody stays on the street and stays off the grass and just keep a safe event.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was the other comment that I had. They're requesting that an EMS be present at the race. Is that factored in? Is there a cost that we charge, or is there?
There is no charge. TRAP, in their support of, in their contract with the borough, said that they would provide those services.
Okay. All right. Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
Okay, I left item 6 out, as Mr. Perednik may need to recuse himself from this if there's any discussion. So I will make a motion to approve item number 6.
Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Mr. Dalton, to approve the temporary community event permit for Feria Latina.
So, Mr. Kovaleski, I believe Mr. Prednick should state why his reason for his recusal on the record, and then hand a handwritten recusal to Mr. Crack.
Yeah, I just have a conflict of interest. So I don't know if I just need to abstain from any discussion. Is that sufficient?
Then you should also abstain from discussion as well.
Okay.
Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? 1. Motion carries 7-0-1.
And then lastly, consider a memorandum of understanding regarding use and occupancy of facilities, also the Civic Center for emergency purposes with the Phoenixville Area School District.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Ms. Dugan. On the motion. Mr. Prednick.
I'd just like to thank borough staff and school district for working this out. I think the last winter was a big issue as far as where to put people and where to have shelters. So I think this is a great move forward to help us. Hopefully we don't need to use the shelters, but if in case we do, I think this is a good action to have in place.
Thank you, Mr. Prednick. Any other comment? I just had a question. I noticed that it's between the Phoenixville Civic Center and the school district. Is there a reason why it's not between the borough and the school district?
I can change that.
I don't know.
Yeah, because the Civic Center isn't an entity, the borough is. So, well, I'll take care of that.
Okay. Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Mr. Bowers.
Question, is our emergency management team need to then identify location?
It is actually already in both the school districts and the borough's emergency operations plans. This is just the technical side with the MOU, formalizing it, correct?
Finance Committee?
There was no action to report at this time.
Infrastructure?
Nothing to report.
Economic Development? Nothing to report. Policy?
All righty. I would like to make a motion to consider scheduling and advertising a public hearing to consider an ordinance amendment to Chapter 27, which is zoning, to repeal Chapter 27-605 in its entirety and replace it with a new chapter, Chapter 27-605, entitled Wireless Communication Facilities, as recommended in Council Committee 3-0.
Thank you, Mr. Dalton.
Second that.
Motion by Mr. Dalton, second by Mr. Bowers. On the motion? Seeing no comment, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
All righty. Secondly, I'd like to make a motion to consider scheduling and advertising a public hearing to consider an ordinance amendment to Chapter 15, Motor Vehicles and Traffic, as recommended out of committee 3-0.
Motion by Mr. Dalton, second by Ms. Mayo. On the motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
And I think lastly, I'd like to make a motion to consider approving the motor vehicle record review policy as recommended by committee 3-0.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Dalton, second by Mr. Prednick. On the motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Moving right along, item 13, public participation. I'll open up the second round of public participation and again invite members of the public to come up. Again, please sign in, acknowledge whether or not you are a borough resident, and please keep comments to 5 minutes. Seeing no public participation, we'll go ahead and close the second round of public participation and move on to staff reports. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mayor's activities for the previous month. May 12th to 17th was the Dogwood Week. The parade on Saturday the 17th was a good call by the J.C.'s to cancel Friday, May 16th event due to the rain. It helped preserve the park. Overall, great work by the J.C.'s on this annual event. Again, this event helps many local nonprofits like the Lions, Kiwanis raise funds, which in turn are also reinvested in our local community. This year, the Lions Club special was the Jimmy Kovaleski cheeseburger, which sold out every night. Again, job well done by all. On Tuesday, May 20th was Election Day. Polling locations can be found on the borough website. Within the borough, the polling location is no longer located at the middle school, and there is a new polling spot at Franklin Commons. On Wednesday, May 21st, I met with Cub Pack 119 out of Barkley Elementary School, which also teams up with Troop 58 of the Boy Scouts. The Pack and Scout Masters presented an overview of what they are about. I also spoke about the mayor's duties to the group. When asked how much the mayor makes, it was very interesting. The Scouts felt that the mayor should be paid $1,000 a week. If council wants to take this under advisement, I would have no objections. On Thursday, May 22nd, our Facebook page, Phoenixville Police, was launched. Please visit us and like the page. As of now, it is still a work in progress. We will be working on content and administration of this site as we move forward on this project. On Friday, May 23rd, Lieutenant Sostrom, Corporal Lance, and myself attended the 22nd Annual Kiwanis Patriotic Celebration at Barkley Elementary School. 4th and 5th grade essay winners were announced. A special address was given by Ms. Shauna Moore, Phoenixville class of 2014, and West Point cadet appointee, class of 2018. Thursday, May 29th, I participated in the cleanup of the downtown area and borough parking lots along with Councilman Kuzner and Councilman Perednik. The effort was organized by Ginger Murphy and the Phoenixville Town Watch group. There were about a dozen members of the Phoenixville Town Watch who did a great job. If you go to the borough website under links and click Community, you'll find information on the Town Watch brochure, the Town Watch reporting forum. This is an active and valuable group that serves the Phoenixville community. Just so happens after the event, Ginger took a picture of the members who participated with the Town Watch banner and posted it on social media. And it got hundreds of remarks and likes. It was a bit humorous because several of the comments mentioned that the word Phoenixville was misspelled. So, I mean, the overall, support from this group and what they contribute to our borough and the recognition that this event created was tremendous, even with our humorous banner there. On Saturday, May 31st, I attended the first of 3 classes for the CERT training, which is Community Emergency Response Team. It's a national certification program by FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security, County Office of Emergency Management. A few of the areas we covered were disaster preparedness, fire safety, terrorism, and overall CERT mission. And Gene, I believe your legislative assistant, Jen, was part of the training here. And it was held here in Borough Hall. On Saturday, May 31st in the evening, I attended a fundraiser benefiting the Phoenixville Senior Center, which is located at 153 Church Street. The Phoenixville Area Senior Center exists to serve, support, and enhance the lives of all senior citizens 60 years of age and older by providing opportunities in the way of programs and activities designed to promote active, independent, healthy lifestyles. Excuse me. Breakfast is offered 2 days a week, and lunch is available 5 days a week. Seniors also enjoy a variety of social events, celebrations, and entertainment. Friday, June 6th, I attended First Friday, which was well attended and met several members of council who were also downtown enjoying the festivities. Some remarks, information from the civil service regarding the creation of the list for police officers. We had received 49 applications, 8 which were rejected due to no Act 120. The physical testing was done on May 17th. 37 applicants showed up and 34 passed. The written exam was held on May 31st. 31 applicants showed up and 21 passed. Oral examinations are set for June 28th. For this round, we had more than double the number of applicants than in past years, and just speaks for the recruitment advertisement paying off. And I just want to say it was a nice job by our Civil Service Commission. Again, I'd like to thank the JCs for the generous contribution tonight, which will aid the department in acquiring some much-needed equipment. Also like to congratulate the Phoenixville class of 2014, who is celebrating their graduation tonight. And finally, to speak on Monday, June 9th, Tuesday, June 10th, the Pennsylvania Law Enforcement Accreditation Commission had a team of 3 assessors who came and visited the department and went through all of our standards, and we got a great reviews, and unofficially, officially, we are accredited at this time. I'd just like to read a letter of commendation that the chief wrote to Sergeant Brian Marshall, who is our accreditation manager at our particular site for our department. Brian, on behalf of the Phoenixville Police Department, I want to personally express my sincerest gratitude to you for the exceptional services that you have provided to the members of our department, and through them to the community at large. As a department accreditation manager, you completely and patiently maintain your focus for the several years that it took to achieve accreditation, arguably the greatest accomplishment that our police department has ever achieved. Your organizational and interpersonal skills were prominently on display as you maneuvered through the minefield of endless policy revision, relentless pursuit of proofs, collaboration with countless entities, the need to train a new secretary assistant 3/4 of the way through the process, as well as constantly having to start and stop your efforts as I became available for a few minutes here and there to confer with you. You effectively managed the day-to-day needs of the initiative while never losing focus on the big picture, even though you knew this project was at least a 2-year commitment. You ensured through the PowerPoint presentations that you created and other teaching methods that our officers were constantly updated on the latest policy changes, as well as consistently briefing both the mayor and me on the progress of the initiative. As a direct result of your performance and your leadership skills, our department basically sailed through the accreditation process, prompting the chairman of the assessment committee to remark to me that he has never had an initial assessment go so smoothly. Your performance exemplified the highest standards of this department, and it goes without saying how proud I am of you for your performance and commitment to our police department, and through them, to the citizens that we so proudly serve. A copy of this letter of commendation will be placed in your personal file. Again, I echo the chief's remarks. I'm extremely proud, the chief, the department, and all of our officers. And Chief, if you'd like to make a few comments on our accreditation.
Well, first let me say that officially we're not accredited yet. The commission meets in July, and at that point, I have no doubt that we will be accredited. The chairman of the committee assured me that today that he was going to recommend for us to be accredited, and we will receive that honor in July, and then hopefully at the August council meeting, we can actually have a presentation to all of you to give you a real good idea of just what we had to go through. But I did want to mention that of the 1,200 law enforcement organizations in the Commonwealth, fewer than 100 are accredited, and we will be only the second in all of Chester County to be accredited. So, you know, as they say, if it was easy, everybody would have it, and it was not easy. So it's a huge feather in the cap. I would like to thank the members of Borough Council for your support, because if it wasn't for you supporting us financially and I guess philosophically as well, to try to you were behind us in our efforts, and if it wasn't for you backing us, we wouldn't have been able to accomplish this. The efforts of Sergeant Marshall, who was just absolutely relentless in the last several years, but ultimately it was the efforts of the actual officers. It's easy for me to put out a policy and say, hey, look, you know, we're great because this is what we do. It's difficult to actually go out there and do that day after day after day and prove that we did that day after day. So it really is a huge feather in the cap of the officers of the Phoenixville Police Department, and the citizens should be proud of that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chief. Manager's report.
Mr. President, you have 3 items in front of you. The first is a staff's recommendation to award the collection services contract. This is for the water that we've been working on for the last couple of months to Portnoy Law Associates Limited. The memorandum was in your packet as to why we made that recommendation, and council's pleasure. The second is consider approval of a letter to PennDOT authorizing the detour route. This is pretty significant. It's going to shut down Route 23 as it goes through Schuylkill Township. We think that's it's important that in the detour that we ask PennDOT to provide some assistance because they're going to be using our roads in order to have that detour. And then the third is consider a letter of support to the Colonial Theater grant application. And I know Ms. Foote is in the audience if you have questions there. So 1, 2, and 3, and we're ready to answer to whatever you want us to answer to.
Mr. Prednick.
I just want to bring up on number 1, the awarding the collection services contract to Port of Law Associates. I just want to state one of the items that I thought was, there's many important items in their proposal, but I think one of the most important to me is we do not charge any commissions. This is coming from them. We do not charge any commissions. We remit 100% of the face, penalty, and accrued interest to the borough weekly. So, Mr. Crack, I just want to confirm that in your meetings with them, there's no sort of sidebar to that. There's no caveats to that. And my understanding is if somebody owes $100, boroughs can get $100, and then the penalties on top of that, we have to amend an ordinance so that the delinquent person can then pay those fees.
We will have to, in all cases, with all 4 firms, we would have to do the ordinance regardless. But yes, that's exactly what we understood.
Ms. Dugan.
I'm not hot here. Okay, I'll just speak up. I'm just wondering, this looks like an interesting deal for us because it doesn't, some of them require the, like I noticed that some of them were like 20%, but some of them they would pass that along to the people that were collecting them. My concern about this whole thing is that this is, it's still not working. We're trying to get blood from the stone here to begin with, because if these people had money, they would have already paid us, and now we're going to put more fees on top of that. And I'm not sure this is really going to help us collect all of the money that we really need to. It's good now. I'm not sure this is actually going to help us collect all the money that I was hoping that, you know, we'd be able to collect by adding more to what they owe us. And I don't know. I mean, like, I understand that I'll probably be on an island on myself on this one, but I just really am not sure a collection agency is the appropriate way to go with this. So just wanted to say that.
Mr. Richter.
I would just like to make a motion so that we can open up discussion, if that's all right. So I'd like to make a motion to award the collection services to Portnoy Law Associates per the manager's memorandum.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Mr. Dalton. Discussion on the motion. Mr. Prednick.
I just want to make a point. There is in here, as you go through, there is a hardship clause where they do have people that have hardship issues that can't pay. They will take care of that, and they do ask that the borough allow them at the discretion. But the borough can, and Gene, please, Mr. Clark, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the borough can then step in and establish when that hardship level is across or what's the guidelines for that hardship. That's the way I understood it.
That is a true statement, and that is something that we have to work through council. What we currently have as a policy of council is that we have an initial 90-day, but we have up to 1 year between Mr. Neese at 90 days and myself as 1 year. I don't believe that, based on recent discussions, that there's any desire to go past 1 year. So unless you want to change those numbers, that's what we would sit down with the firm and discuss with regard to the hardship.
Any other comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-1 with Ms. Dugan opposing. What is council's pleasure? Mr. Bowers.
The ordinance prior to this action, that goes up through policy?
I will have to have this in front of policy in 2 weeks from tonight, and to you on July 8th to consider scheduling and advertising for the August, whatever date that is, August 12th, as for approval, so that we're in line with the projected September 1 start date.
Thank you.
I just have a question. Since everybody seems to be relatively on the same page, could we forego the policy part of that and tonight schedule and advertise? Make a recommendation to schedule and advertise?
I think that would be premature since we don't have the proposed ordinance amendment in front of us.
Okay.
Any other comments, or what is council's pleasure with items 2 and 3? All right. Mr. Bowers?
I'll make a motion to advance the approval of a letter to PennDOT authorizing the detour route through Phoenixville.
Motion by Mr. Bowers, second by Ms. Mayo. On the question, Mr. Bowers.
The manager alluded to contributions from PennDOT to support the detour through Phoenixville. What would that entail? I know we have been in the past anxious to see if we could get an additional portable electronic sign for traffic management through the borough. Is that an opportunity for such a sign?
That's a good question. I don't know that they would be able to provide what I've identified in the letter is a connection of the Jacobs and Walnut intersection on Montclair side to be closed looped and tied to our system at Star and Bridge, so that traffic isn't backed up on that side. At minimum, they will definitely reset the timing, but I guess it wouldn't be inappropriate to ask for funding to acquire one of those electronic signs, so as to help with the detour, if that's so desired.
Ms. Dugan?
I'm just wondering, if we don't approve this, where exactly are they going to go? Like, is this something that we have any ability not to approve?
What they would do, here's the detour, the simplest detour for most of the folks off of Nut Road at 23 at Bridge Street, is to come, they would route them down through downtown, across the 200 block and the 100 block. That's what we own in the borough. On to 29, bless you, over to Montclair, and then out Egypt Road and back to 422. If we did not approve this, they would still get us, because they would take the traffic up to Main Street at 29, come down 29, and jam it up at Star and Bridge.
And we think that there is a way that we can get some funding off of there, because with all the people using like this extra wear and tear on the roads, that I feel like that they should have to pay for.
Well, we actually, we initially said that, but remember, we also have the turnback funds to repave the road, which we haven't done yet. So they've, in essence, already given us the funding to repave that section of the roadway. But I like the idea of the electronic signs, because we can use those all over the place in the borough. And if they're willing to pay the dollars for that, that would be huge. I like that idea.
And this is for how long a period of time?
They're projecting 6 months, from the beginning of the fall for 6 months. They gave a projection for the High Bridge, which is now the Veterans Memorial Gate Street Bridge, and they came in under that time. So my guess is that's an arterial that they want done, and they're going to put every bit of their resources to get it done in 6 months.
Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. What is council's pleasure with item 3? Mr. Prednick?
I'd like to make a motion to consider approval of the letter to support the Colonial Theater grant application.
Motion by Mr. Prednick, second by Ms. Mayo. On the motion. Mr. Prednick.
Has there been any studies or anything done by the applicant for how it'll affect parking, how it's going to mitigate parking?
Ms. Foote is in the audience. If it's council's pleasure, she can come up and answer.
Absolutely.
Please.
Please.
Thank you. Should I restate my question?
Do you need the question restated, or did you get that?
No, I have it. I have it. First, I want to say this is my first time in the room. It's great. And I also want to mention that about a year and a half ago, Borough Council had come, a lot of them came down to the theater to see the building next door and hear about the expansion, and I realized a lot of you are new faces. So I want to put that out now, that maybe we should do that sooner than later, because things are going really, really well, and we're pretty excited. So I'd love for all of you to know what's going on. Parking. We have not done a parking study. I'm not aware of the fact that a business in town would have to do a parking study, but I do want to say a few things about parking, because we do think about it a lot. First of all, I think that we don't want to let parking or our parking situation drive our economic plans. That really, we should dream big and then say, okay, now what are we going to do about parking? So I think we have to switch our thinking as we move forward. The other thing I would say, and I think most of you know this, that the real parking problems are on Friday and Saturday night in town. I'm downtown all the time, and during the week, it's pretty easy to grab a spot, even right on the main street for free, to grab a drink or see a movie or go and have dinner. So our proposal to expand is really certainly in our self-interest and our business plan, but it's also because we would like to drive more people to Phoenixville during the day, during the week, and that's the kind of energy that our merchants need and our restaurants need for lunchtime. So we want to make the parking problem worse, is what I'm trying to say in a long way. Because then opportunities, both private and public, become more obvious, whether they're parking garages, because they can pay for themselves, because there's a problem all the time, and we have to address it. We are doing very well. We're almost halfway to our goal for Phase 2. Phase 2, just very quickly, is adding 2 theaters over in 225 Bridge Street and a nice big lobby. So we're going to have a lot of energy going on in the 200 block of Bridge Street. And we're hoping to start construction beginning of 2015. Any other questions?
Just roughly, how many people will the additional 2 theaters bring?
That's a great question. We've done a ton of planning, and we did bring in a group from New York called Web Management. They work with performing arts centers. And we anticipate after 3 years of operations, we will triple our attendance. which hovers around 45,000 a year. So we're looking at around 115 to 120,000 people a year. But remember, it's 7 days a week.
Well, I mean, just to keep it simple, just like on a Friday or Saturday night when we know the parking situation is at its worst. So on a Friday or Saturday night, what do you have today, and what do you project you're going to have?
Well, on the worst weekends, it gets pretty tight when we have a concert. And a concert is 500 to 600 people in the theater. You figure 3 people per car. I think that's how you figure it out. Like theater people usually travel 2 to 3 people in a car. So that, along with all the restaurants who are bringing people in, that so on a Friday and Saturday night, the worst now is 500 people in one room. We would be adding another 230 seats. 2 more theaters. So it's not 2 more.
Is that 230 or is that 460?
230.
230.
So one's 177, the other one's 65 or something. So I don't know the math there just off the top of my head. So, I mean, we got to keep it going, guys. Yeah.
No, I'll just add, I commend you for the work you're doing and for expanding the theater, bringing people into town. I definitely agree with dreaming big and taking care of the issue. I just think this is something that we need to keep on the board for the parking steering committee, just the fact that we're going to have quite a bit of additional people in town on Friday and Saturday night, and just, I think this makes the parking situation we have potentially a little worse, and just something that we should think about.
But the exciting thing is we'll get people downtown during the week, during the day. Because we're going to start opening like around 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock every day, and we're hoping to really help to augment the restaurant lunch and the small owners of businesses, because they struggle during the week for sure. Anything else? Thanks so much. I appreciate everybody's support. Everybody, police department, everybody's been great to the theater, and we do appreciate it.
Thank you, Mary.
Mary, before you go, I did attend that informational walkthrough a couple years ago.
Okay, great.
And it was very eye-opening, and I cannot wait till you guys get done this project, because it's going to be so great.
It is going to be
for the
great.
borough,
Yeah.
for the Colonial, for all the people that can come and enjoy it. It's so beautiful. It looks like it belongs in like Grand Central Station or something like that.
Yeah, and the way we're trying to position this is we are right now an independent art film house, a movie house that sometimes 12 to 15 times a year does concerts. What we're transitioning to is a regional performing arts center. And right now, we already draw 70% of our folks are coming from outside Phoenixville. And those are tourists, maybe one-day tourists, but they spend a lot more money, so those are dollars coming into town. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Mary.
Mary, I think you have one more question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, not a question. If you can I get your contact information? I think the new guys would like to get down there and take a tour.
Yes, yeah, I'd say we should right away, because there's lots happening, so I have a card, I can get you a card.
Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Moving on, co-directors, public works, fire chiefs, finance directors, I believe they're all in our packet. Fire department liaison, anything? Okay.
No, I just want to make sure, are we skipping over the finance director? Because I did have a question for Mr. Neese.
Yes, if you have a question, I'll ask Mr. Neese to come up to the podium.
Yes, sir.
So I just had a question. I know last council meeting we were discussing the water, and we had a couple of water deals that were going through that night. Whatever happened that night happened. I was just curious, since we didn't have a finance committee and get a chance to ask this question, but what happened to those two that we had last time? I know one was about 13,000, one was about 60,000. Can you give us an update on where they stand today?
I can give you an update on one pretty easily. The other one, I would have to do a little bit more research off the top of my head. I do know that the gentleman that had the approximately 13,000 came in and took care of that bill so that he could open up his sidewalk cafe, I think that's the right term, sidewalk permit, so he could get that. The other one has made a less than 1 year agreement to pay off the portion that's his personal residence, but I do not believe anything's being done on the business side of it.
Thank you. And then last time you also mentioned that you had a stack, I think that was the word you used, of other requests that were coming through and you were preparing to put through to Finance Committee. Has that changed as well?
Based on council's direction from last time, Gene and I believe that you basically said that you didn't want to see anything over a year, so we have told those folks that it can't be. And so that's where we are. That you didn't want anything over a year. Well, my point was, I think what my understanding was from Gene and my understanding from council's last action was, you don't want agreements that are over a year. So therefore, we're telling folks the agreement needs to be less than a year.
Thank you, Mr. Neese.
So I've heard rumblings in multiple directions about our current overall financial position for the year. I haven't seen any hard numbers. We didn't have a finance committee to talk about it. So could you give us a sense where we are?
As a general sense, we're doing well. So I don't want to run up red flags. However, I mean, tax collection-wise for real estate taxes, we're actually collecting at a % higher than we've ever collected to date. We're not going to collect more real estate taxes than we can collect. So, I mean, the fact that we are at 96% collection of what we anticipated at this point is incredibly good, but we're still not going to go above 100. You know, we might go a little bit above 100 based on additional properties that are added, but not, you know, in that way. So I think probably what you're referring to is that our EIT, earned income tax, is actually lagging from last year, about $100,000 roughly, and we had actually budgeted an additional $60,000 this year in the intent to come in, which gives us a gap of about $160,000. Where we are right now, I've contacted our Keystone collector who's collecting that, asked them for a review. They're in the process of doing a more in-depth review. The initial response they gave me is that several of the municipalities, and we're one of those several, have experienced a time issue that we actually received a larger amount at the end of last year than what they would have anticipated, that people were actually paying ahead at the end of last year, and that's why we are a little bit slower coming into the beginning of this year. I would have bought that for the first 3 months is basically what I told them. And I said that's not an answer that I'm okay with because we still continue to lag for April and May. So I've asked them to go back and relook at that, and they are for me. And they're doing more of an in-depth study. I've asked them to look at, is there any taxpayers that have moved out of the area that is part of that reason? Because every once in a while you get a person who has significant earnings and it does affect. $100,000 would be real significant earnings, but so I don't think that's going to be the case. But I think that there might be multiple things going on. I did notice that the school district is up just like about 3%, but Schuylkill Township, we're off about, I believe, 7 or 8%. Schuylkill Township's off about 17%. So but East Pikeland's up about 36. So I don't know if it's that there was somebody who was paying to the wrong area. And so we're looking into that to see what's happened, why all of a sudden this big shift.
Anything else for Mr. Neese? Mr. Bowers?
With regard to EIT, do we take any steps to capture temporary workers within the borough limits?
Are we speaking about somebody who works for a month in the borough and then unlike Philadelphia has sports players that come in and play for a night and leave and they collect that? Is that what you're talking about? I mean, we don't necessarily have.
So we have, so a developer building a project in the borough and has a sales office that's staffed.
Yeah.
That sales office may be present for a month, it may be present
Yeah.
for 6 months.
I understand where you're heading. The answer is the company is supposed to report where they're working. However, if they're living someplace else that has the equal amount of collection, the money would go to where they live versus to where they work. The only time the borough collects for somebody who works in the borough is for a municipality that doesn't collect for the EIT tax. So that would be the only time that we would actually get it on a temporary employment issue there. And companies are told that they have to do that, but I can't promise you that that always happens in that way.
Thank you, Mr. Neese. Anything further on the reports? Seeing none, we have executive session for, a need for executive session for personnel litigation and real estate. What is council's pleasure? I guess we may, potentially.
I'll make a motion to go to executive session for personnel, litigation, and real estate.
Thank you. We'll give a second, do we? Oh, I thought you did need a motion. For the record, it is 9:14. Borough Council is coming back from executive session. No action is necessary, so I will take a motion to adjourn. So moved. Thank you very much. Good night, everyone.